Jonathan Chick back with you with another episode of Shtisel Man, and we are now up to Season 2, Episode 8, a very poignant episode where we see the passing of the beloved Bubby, grandmother to Giti, Akiva, Tzviarya, etc., and mother of Shulam. Before her passing, she asks poignantly to be taken to the sea, as she hasn't been there for 60 years. Shulam doesn't have the time. He's focusing on his current bride-to-be, and Giti's busy with house and other familial duties. So they don't take up the request of their grandmother or mother, and she in a poignant, again, in a very, very bittersweet montage, does go to the sea herself and then passes on. Now, I want to focus, though, on the scene where Giti asks Giti has this conversation with her grandmother, and Bubby, in her last interaction with what we see to be a family member, offers a unsolicited piece of advice to Giti about pride and arrogance, telling her the story of the Navardic, the Altar of Navardic, which I believe is actually a true vignette, where the Navardic school, the school of Navardic teachings, a Lithuanian style type of yeshiva, were very into preventing bad character traits in almost in a quote-unquote negative manner, and it would not be far-fetched at all for a Navardic type of place to instruct their students to go to public places and do something foolish. For example, as we see in this episode, go to a pharmacy and instead of asking for something that a pharmacy sells, ask for nails. Of course, later we see in the dream sequence, Giti having a dream about such a story happening to her. But let's focus on why would Bubby give such a very, a lesson which I think we might all think would be more appropriate for Shulam. Shulam is clearly a person who is struggling with pride issues and whatever level arrogance and keeping up appearances and whatnot. What about Giti? Giti we see as, again, I don't want to pick on her, but I do want to accentuate, I think, what the writers might have been thinking when they penned this episode. Giti seems to be the sort of somewhat broken housewife, but if you really analyze some of the things that were going on, she may actually have this sort of problem with pride. Why? She wants to get her son into the best yeshiva, the best school that other family members did. Is it the best school for her? Or is it actually better for a student to go to the school that is best for them as opposed to which one has the best reputation and looks good in, the appearances of the community? She does come to this realization at a later point. Same thing with her objection to Ruchami's marriage. Now, again, Ruchami's marriage is a bit much in the fact how young she is and all that. But again, it's a matter of pride that really is, in a way, not fully, but partially calling the shots here, because it doesn't look good for the family. It doesn't look good for the whole reputation of the family. And finally, we have, of course, the huge storyline of her and her Lipa leaving, and very, 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 very consciously and intentionally, Giti does not want this to be broadcast in the community and to be very quiet about whatever happened to Lipa back in Argentina. Now, that's understandable. In fact, all these things are understandable, and the Jewish community often struggles with things like reputation and keeping up appearances. Human beings struggle with that. Human beings struggle with these type of issues all the time. But the way it's shown here, though, I think what we're trying to get at is that it actually affects Giti in very, very deep ways, because her own way of pushing things under the rug and not addressing things and worrying more about reputations versus what's good for the family is very destructive when it comes to specifically her relationship with her husband. Of course, things may happen later in episodes, and we're not going to do any spoilers. So, but till now, as we are in middle of the series so far, season 2, right in episode 8, we see that Giti, although a very likable character in some ways, also seems to be a little bit of a, you'll forgive the term, but a ball buster, or someone who really can be quite controlling and quite prideful, not in the way that we usually view it in the obvious way of Shulam, but more in a way of trying to control things and trying to, do things that may not be in her own control and really not for the best of the other people involved. Thus, Bubby gives the lesson of go to the pharmacy and ask for nails. Go do something in public which appears foolish, but brings us back down to life, that we're not in control of everything. And ultimately, as Bobby says, that God's in control, and that sometimes we just can't control everything. And that's a very, very important lesson, I think, that, and again, one of the pathos of the series is such that in a very, very subtle, sometimes manner, sometimes not so subtle, but in this case, I think in a very subtle manner, the writers are actually reflecting very much Jewish values of being humble in an appropriate manner, not being low self-esteem, humility, but humility that is born in understanding that we're not always calling the shots. The famous Yiddish line is that, we make plans and God laughs. The Mensch tracht, the Eibishter lacht. The Mensch, a human being, makes plans, right? Tracht, we do things, we involve ourselves in the events. Then Eibishter, the Hashem, lacht, he laughs. Ultimately, he's in control, and that type of lesson was very, very appropriate for not just Giti, but for all of us. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will be back with more.